My name is Haley Slaughter, and I am a dyslexia instructional specialist with the Waco Independent School District. If you've recently had a child who has been identified with dyslexia, you may have questions. We know that dyslexia is a brain difference that makes reading, spelling, and writing difficult. Children with dyslexia are just as smart as other children, but they have difficulty understanding writing and reading. Reading is a complicated process that starts with phonemic awareness, becoming familiar with individual sounds in words. Reading and spelling are harder for kids with dyslexia because it is much harder for them to hear and work with those sounds. We know a lot about what can help students with reading and language skills. The most important thing is specialized dyslexia reading instruction. Texas law requires that all public schools provide this to those identified with dyslexia. Once we have identified them with dyslexia, we do a very special kind of reading intervention. We use the MTA program in Waco Independent School District. All of the dyslexia specialists are certified teachers who have had additional training to use the MTA program. It is important to know that even though individuals do not outgrow dyslexia, they can acquire the skills that they need in reading and writing to become strong learners.
If your child was recently identified with dyslexia, chances are many other things were tried before, including tutoring and small group instruction. You may wonder how work we do is different from small group tutoring. Dyslexia tutoring requires many things, but one of the things that is very important to dyslexia work is multisensory techniques. By multisensory, we mean lessons which use the auditory or listening skills, the visual skills, where the student looks at materials, and we also use the kinesthetic or the feeling skills, so that they might feel different textures, work with plastic letters that they move around, or do different large movements with their arms. Sometimes students may write in sand while echoing a letter and its sound, or they may clap out syllables of someone's name. We try to engage all three of those senses during most of our lessons. We use a visual schedule. Each card represents a small lesson or practice. Lessons are logical, sequential, and the skills are practiced over and over in many different ways. Some refer to this as the slow drip method of learning. Instead of spending 30 minutes practicing a difficult skill, the student works for 3 to 10 minutes, then moves on to the next activity on the schedule. This is Schedule 1, used for the first few months. There's a place at every school in the Waco Independent School District where a dyslexia specialist may work with a small group of students or with an individual. The room reflects many things that we use to help with working with language. You see the visual schedules on the wall. You see the alphabet cards, the blue cards that show cursive and print in uppercase and lowercase. You'll also see lots of papers that are on the board. Those are papers that we're always adding to that help the students remember rules for spelling or some of the rules for reading. There's a chart that you see, the green chart near the flag, that's procedures for spelling that says you look and listen, you echo and unblend, you spell out loud, you write the word, then you code the word. So we use procedures for many of our lessons. In the history of language lesson, students discuss the history of written language, symbols they might see in everyday life and their meaning, or they may discuss dyslexia awareness and student talents. The history of language lesson is only taught during Kit 1 for new students, and it takes 3 to 5 minutes. The alphabet lesson also takes 3 to 5 minutes per day. Students learn letter names and the order of the alphabet as we begin in Kit 1. We use plastic upper and lowercase letters. We use cards with both cursive and print on them, and we also use some games for this activity.
Vowels, A, E, I, O, and U, and then there are all the other letters, which are called consonants. The initial letter is A, the final letter is Z, the middle letters are M and N. So initial letter A, final letter Z, all the letters in between are called our medial letters. Go ahead and place the letters in ABC order. I have a strip here if you need some help putting them in order.
Students have 2 decks of reading cards that have to do with the sounds that the group has already learned. So when a student starts in Kit 1, they don't have any cards, but as they study each individual sound, we add those sounds to our decks. So after a few lessons, they increase the number of cards, and they're constantly reviewing the cards. This only takes a few moments during every lesson cycle, but it's part of that sequential practice that helps them remember the keywords and sounds and the way those sounds are written. We also have a deck of cards which represents the sounds that the letters make. The teacher shuffles these cards daily, pronounces the sounds, the student echoes the sound, spells out loud, and sometimes goes ahead and writes that sound in some sensory material or on notebook paper. Most days we will teach a lesson that is new learning. There's 2 kinds of new learning: multisensory letter introductions and language concepts. The multisensory letter introductions would last over several years. There's 102 letter introductions in the MTA system. They're taught through a series of exercises called linkages, which link the listening, speaking, writing, and movement with the sound of a grapheme or letter and its name. The other kind of new learning is called a language concept, and it's a lesson that doesn't introduce a new sound, but teaches the students one thing about how language works. An example of a concept might be when you first introduce suffix S to students in Kit 1, so that you teach that when you add an S to some words, it makes it plural, more than one. But then later on, there will be another lesson where you will talk about adding apostrophe S, and there will be much practice with each of those different concepts. Students practice for a few minutes daily on letters and words that have been previously introduced through the linkages and practiced. The students also code these words. The fluid movement of cursive handwriting is another support to our multisensory learning techniques. Students who are in the MTA program typically develop very nice cursive handwriting. It's helpful to not have to pick up the pencil and put it down again, and to write a sound in one fluid movement. Okay, students practice spelling words with sounds that have been introduced in the multisensory linkages. There's a procedure for spelling, which is called SOS, which is short for spontaneous oral spelling, or the students often call it Save Our Spelling. The procedure is to look and listen, to echo and unblend, to spell out loud, to write, and then to code and read. This way, a child can correct their own spelling mistake. When they read it as they've coded it, if they haven't done it correctly, then they'll often self-correct at that point. Good job. I like that you're using your procedures. Oral expression is a short exercise that leads to better expression of ideas, which later leads to better written expression. The kinds of lessons that you would do in oral expression would be mini lessons of the sorts of things that would be taught in a regular language arts class, but you would limit it to a small amount of time and to one concept. For a few minutes every day, the teacher reads quality literature or nonfiction texts to the students for their enjoyment and for comprehension help. The last thing on the lesson cycle is a review of whatever the new lesson for the day was, plus at least one other concept. You'll notice that this sign looks a little like a fish hook, and it's intended to kind of hook the student into that learning and secure it in the memory. We've only had time to show you a few of the activities that we do daily in the dyslexia program in Waco. Each school has a dyslexia specialist assigned to that school, so please contact the school and ask to speak to the dyslexia specialist if you have more questions. There are also parent training opportunities occasionally during the school year in order to give parents more information about dyslexia and about how you might help your child at home.